Hey everyone, this is Jaxie, and today we are going to get excited about history with Decisive Campaigns, Warsaw to Paris, and this is Case Yellow. So we are jumping right into it and moving Army Group A. We continue to push into the Netherlands, and so far there has not been a ton of Dutch resistance, but if you look to the west where they have their flooding, that is going to be the Dutch strategy, where they're going to use the flooding to narrow us down to just a few corridors with roads and cities and other strong points where tanks and other motorized type units won't be able to make it in easily. So we're going to have to kind of narrow our forces and stay within these corridors. It's going to be a bit of a fight, but it's really smart on the Dutch and their part, because in the open field, as we saw last turn, they're just not going to last. But by doing this and forcing us to fight in cities and forcing us to have to go into defiles and not use our numerical superiority, it really makes a lot of sense, and it's about the best they can do. Like, I always feel bad when I'm playing the Dutch or when someone else is in play by email, because they really don't have enough troops to cover. They do have nice river lines, but as we've seen with air and artillery, their units just shatter sometimes, and part of that is that command control and that morale. It's so low for the Dutch and the Belgians in this scenario, but we're doing what we can, and we're just going to keep pushing. And here, what I want to try to do is pry apart the 4th Division, and not much doing on the artillery, because I do have to find a way to start making it in. I'm going to have to get these units out of the way. I can't let them fortress up. I got to try to get over this first set of difficult terrain and these first rivers so I can capitulate them as quickly as possible and get a move on with the rest of the fight. And again, each turn is only 1 day, so there's not as much of a rush early on. But still, I don't want to get bogged down anywhere where I don't have to. And right there, good results on the artillery. Still have to overstack. I'm never going to like that, but it instantly shatters. And such good results. The scenario is just so rough on the Low Countries. I don't think we're going to run into a ton of trouble until the British start arriving in their deal positions and until we meet the bulk of the French army. But right now, 26th Corps, really not having a lot of issues. They're moving up nicely. And hopefully get some good artillery here. Get some cracks in their lines. Every little bit helps. Once again, as long as you are taking down their readiness and their integrity, you're making progress. And the longer the scenarios get, the more attrition does start to matter. We see the Dutch Air Force, bless their hearts, they tried. They take off fighters, but they lose a bunch of them. And we can see here, we have enough recon to notice that they're getting hit with a 50% penalty. That's more of those command and control issues. It's a random roll of the dice for which units will get hit with penalties like that. Sometimes it's action points, sometimes it's offense or defense. And right there, it works out in our favor totally. The Germans, you can see in the top right corner, we have 100% command and control. It represents that Germany at this stage of the war was definitely doing better than the Allies, and they were better able to control their units, and the high command and the generals were more in tune with each other. Now, they weren't always 100%, and as we get deeper into the scenario, we'll talk more about the history and how it actually unfolded when the Meuse was crossed and Guderian and his higher-ups, the disagreements they had. But for now, I think it makes sense to model that Germany is going to have a smoother go than any of the Allied countries. And right here, we're going to cross the river, but then attack this artillery unit, try to get it out of the way, and it shatters. It doesn't even take up that much movement. And so we're still going to push forward. I want to try to get everything out of the way so that our panzers here, 9th Panzer Division, can swing around and just completely cut off the Netherlands. One of the mechanics in this scenario is if that units can't trace a path back to Paris, they're going to start losing morale, and the entire Allied nation is going to lose morale. So even smaller encirclements are going to hit national morale. And then if you get the big Dunkirk pocket and you get the historical March to the Sea, it's going to just drain their national enthusiasm, and it's going to really weaken their units, and that's a huge boon to the Germans as they march forward. You don't have to take Paris, but you have to take a lot. It's over 70 victory points, and anything you can do to make these countries just give up, not want to fight, is what you need to do. And it makes sense historically because it was devastating to see this armored pocket. There really wasn't such a big war of movement, the likes that the world had seen before this, just to pocket so many units and to use mass tanks so independently. It was very new, very scary. And even with historical battles like Tannenberg and things like that, to see it with tanks and trucks and planes, and that was something else. But moving forward here, 6th Army is starting to get over. We don't have Eindhoven yet, but they have so many rivers and bridges. The best they can do is spread out their units for these little blocking detachments, trying to keep us from going. One interesting thing about putting a unit on a bridge hex is it does force the Germans to make a decision, because when the Germans bombard with artillery or with air, it does roll and they're leaving those forts unoccupied. I'm going to see if I can sneak in. Thanks for that. They're trying to pull back and go to a different line. I don't really blame them, but they really should think about not letting me have totally free crossings. But as I was saying, if you attack those units, then you could end up destroying the bridge. And so you really have to weigh, is it worth it to push them out of the way and soften them up first if the bridge gets destroyed, and then it's going to kill your armored movement, and then you have to waste an engineer in the next turn rebuilding the bridge. Or if an engineer is not in position, then a lot of units are going to eat movement penalties while you wait. For now, though, they're just going to let us have that city. We get some bridge crossings, and we keep moving towards the Albert Canal. Slowly but surely, we are wheeling west and southwest into Belgium. These units are going to press against the Dutch, but really my plan is to start wheeling south. I want to get the Dutch out as quickly as possible and start focusing more on the Belgians. I really don't want to mess around with the Dutch more than I have to, but more crossings, and this is nice. They have some forward deployments, but not too many. It does mean we're going to run into more Belgian forces as we move forward, but we should get to their lines more quickly, and then we can make some decisions. And I do have some headquarters getting some decent cards, but I'm holding off right now on playing movement or attack cards just because it's so early. I don't really want to waste them on these vanguard units that are so far out. I'm going to wait until we have trouble getting across a river in Belgium, or I have to worry about the British or the French. And here, motorized regiment, able to just melt it. Happy to do that. The Dutch don't get too many of those, so any damage we can do, I'm going to take. I'm going to be real happy about that result. And now, I usually do this where I'm going to move my infantry first because I'm waiting for that moment where the infantry can blow open a hole and send the armor through. That's just my method. It's been my method. And if you guys play this game, I recommend it. I do like how, for ease of use for the Germans, they don't model the time scale like that. So In all these scenarios, I use that trick where move the infantry, open a hole, send the armor through. And it's real cool. The infantry just don't get in the armor's way. Not the most realistic, but, in a turn-based, you're going to get what you can get. And right here, these early turns, not a ton of opposition. Most of the Belgian units are going to be anchored on the Albert Canal. The British and the French are going to be rushing to the deal. And even on the Albert Canal, they have a lot of forts. It's behind a river, but the Belgians won't have the units to really cover it in depth. So the nice thing is they're going to have defensive positions, but it's going to be about one regiment per hex. And they're not going to be able to hold out against a really concerted attack. And right here, I am going to take some casualties, but there is another bridge I don't have to worry about. And after 2 days of fighting, we're getting pretty close to the Albert Canal up here near Hasselt. And I don't think I can get a ton of follow-up attacks, but I'm hoping if everything goes according to plan, we can be attacking the canal by next turn and then over it the turn after. Artillery, not much good here, but I'll get a follow-up attack, and they do shatter. So we can see the Belgians are starting to line up. Where we have decent recon, they have blown the bridge near Hasselt. Don't blame them. They have some units poised there to blow some other bridges. That's what I would do. And like I said last video, what I would do also was deploying too far forward. If you guys ever play against me, do not make me Belgium if you want any sort of challenge. And here in the south, 4th Corps is actually in a much better position to start assaulting the canal. We're going to lay down some artillery and not much doing there. I don't think I can take them just yet. So let's see how the turn unfolds. Maybe if I bring in some air, can do something. For now, though, the motorized units, they cannot reach the front no matter what they do. So I can move them up while I plan my moves. I jump back and forth sometimes. If I have rearguard units, it gives me a minute or two to consider what I want to do. This isn't Panzer Corps, and as the scenarios get longer, you do have to be more deliberate in where your moves are. I do have some Corps level artillery and Army level artillery, have a lot of divisional level artillery, so I'm hoping I can start hitting the units in the fields where I can, and the ones who are going to be fortressing up around Liege, I can start breaking their entrenchments. But these guys in the field, gonna have good results. Now, 400 paratroopers, not quite enough for an attack, but I'm thinking here with the bridges intact, because Maastricht, they didn't blow any of these. If I can push these units out of the way and not worry about zone of control, I might be able to fling some panzers through here. Unfortunately, right there, really good results, but it just wasn't enough action points to be able to conclude the battle. So I might actually risk doing an overstack. You can attack a unit multiple times. It'll add to the stacking value, but you can resolve them as separate attacks, and I might have to do that depending on how this goes. And let's see if 2 more units. Yep, the casualties weren't even that bad. Lost 100 men, but it was just the amount needed. And now I'm 1 step away from being able to really fling some panzers through the breach. If I can get 4th Panzer Division going, even though this is Army Group A, even though it's the diversion, the more I can threaten here, the more I can encircle. It's all going to add up to reducing that national morale, to pulling more of the British and the French north, and getting ready for my push on Sedan. Not the best bombardment there. Could have hoped for better results. But even though Liege is supposed to be a fortress, I'm already seeing some cracks here, and anywhere where I can start prying these units apart, maybe even getting small encirclements, I will take it. And this was part of the plan historically, and why it worked so well for the Germans, that the Belgian units are here. They wouldn't let the British and French in, so I'm able to spend a good couple turns attacking Belgium without any sort of British or French assistance. And where these forts are, they're kind of scary, but they don't have a defensive band all the way. And they're too far forward, the deal's too far back. It's just, what a mess. They were not that good at coalition fighting yet. But that's why I like this game, because it plays out pretty close to that history. Even though it's not as advanced as the later titles in the series, you get the feel, if you're the Allies, of why dealing with command and control and coalition warfare is a nightmare. And as the Germans, you get to do this and just pushing units out of the way, having panzers attack, weaken demoralized units in the open field, and it's just lovely. Now here, 2-on-1 against set infantry, I'm a little hesitant to. I don't know. It's not going to be the easiest fight, but I want to try. They do destroy some machine guns and 100 men, but I get the victory anyway. And the Belgians and the Dutch, and even then the British and the French, the British, I think, are the best off, but their units don't start at 100% readiness anyway. They really do start reduced, and then once you get those command and control penalties, some of the units, even if they're in a great position and they've never fought, they just fight like garbage. And here, good airstrike. I'll take it, destroyed some artillery. But unfortunately, with some reserve infantry, I'm only going to be able to do so much. However, getting a breakthrough north of Liege this early is nice. And let's see if we can drive a wedge there. About 700 men. It was rough, but it had destroyed one unit. And now I might even be able to get a small encirclement. Nothing to write home about, but every little bit helps. I'm going to use engineers to complete the encirclement. Could be a mistake. They're only going to fight so well. However, I think the Belgians aren't going to want to attack out of their forts. One of the mechanics in the game is when you entrench, if entrenched units launch an attack, they lose some of their entrenchment value. So even though they could probably break open that small encirclement, they're not going to do it because they're not going to want to give up their fort entrenchment. And in Barbarossa especially, you really want to be careful if you're the Soviet player launching attacks and giving up your entrenchment. If you're kind of on the defensive, you really have to plan your counterattacks well, or you're going to waste your forts and waste your rivers launching futile counterattacks and then have no entrenchment value, and the Germans will be able to roll you out of the way. And right there, I don't like that we're losing the newer panzers. I never want to lose my 3s and my 4s, but we do have a nice wedge going here. Real good breakthrough in their lines. And it looks like we can actually get behind Liege and start threatening it. If I can get them to just abandon their forts, or if I can block them from retreating this early, that's going to be nice. A lot of the Belgian plan, too, in addition to Albert Canal, was Namur and Liege, just kind of fortressing up, having a kind of hedgehog plan around those cities. And to be able to pry them apart this early is nice. The only question then in the back of my mind, I have to wonder, well, where are the rest of the Belgian units? What unhappy surprise is waiting for me? But so far, Army Group A is not facing a ton of opposition, and things are moving forward nicely. I am real happy with this result. 8th Army, just moving up, pushing counters, and now I have my fun. So I'm going to take some fighters, do a little bit of reconnaissance, around Sedan. And the French are actually moving up into the Ardennes. They're not turtling on the river. This is interesting. I'm curious if they're going to try to use the values of the forest to use better defense. Now, further to the southeast, 18th Corps. There's a lot of units there, and they're on both sides of the river. They're doing defense in depth. That would take me a while to break through. So that already lets me know I'm probably going to shoot for Sedan, do the historical attack with my panzers, especially 19th Corps. I might even go further northwest of that. But the French are already looking out of position. Just moving my infantry up. Poor Luxembourg, less than a day of fighting. That's historical. Game doesn't even model that. No border skirmishes, nothing like that. It makes sense. I just feel bad for them as I march through. And 8th Corps, 16th Army. It is what it is. They're your infantry. They're going to just try to lock the French 18th Corps down. Keep most of those fortress divisions and fortress brigades from reacting once I make my panzer push. And always good to look at your headquarters, make sure you're not losing any units. Nothing like that. I'm still moving up with infantry first. There are sometimes blocking units in the Ardennes, and they'll generally position themselves on cities or bridges or in those little fort hexes. So I tried to move the infantry up, make sure I get reconnaissance. If the 21st bumps into something, that's way more important than having my panzers get surprised and either lose units or at least just lose action points and movement. Because once they break free, we are doing the sprint to the coast. Moving up my rear guard. And if things get dicey and once the French do start sending reinforcements, 40th Corps will come in handy. Like, the panzers rush through, but the French are going to try to plug that gap, and they're going to counterattack it, and the British are going to counterattack the armored spearhead. So you got to make sure you're not forgetting to move your infantry corps, and that they are still keeping up. And right there, we're about halfway through the Ardennes. No meaningful resistance just yet. But always got a screen. Keep my babies safe. Those panzers are my babies. They're going to do most of the heavy lifting. And one nice thing about this scenario, because of the way it's laid out, at least for the first few turns until you start hitting heavy resistance, you can keep moving so many of your divisions in group mode, and it's going to save you clicks. I do love this game, but I know a lot of people bounce off of it once they see that you're moving regiment by regiment, and there's support units, and there's headquarters. It is very click heavy. You can use hotkeys, and sometimes I do, but after a point I don't really bother. I've just kind of accepted that it's very click heavy. But to represent the battle and the feel the way I want, I consider it worth it. I know some people, because of that, they say it's more cumbersome than War in the East. But, War in the East, once I start having to do headquarters build-ups and moving support battalions and things like that, I don't mind having the actual counters on the field for that. And we have our first little Belgian unit. They're saying, oh boy, tanks. This is kind of scary. But I don't know if I can move them out of the way just yet. We're getting there, though. I'm thinking next turn we will be almost near Sedan, but probably not till the 13th or 14th of May will we actually start attacking. And historically, it did take the Germans a few days to get up to Sedan and get up to the Meuse and be able to attack, because taking tanks through a forest is not easy. But that's the brilliance of the German plan, is you're going to think to yourself, what type of geniuses would try to move tanks through a forest on these small roads? No one would do that. And that's why they weren't expecting it. And here I do have rally cards. Because rally cards affect morale, units don't start with 100 morale. Even the good units will have like between 50 and 80. So a rally card will always give them a big boost and let them fight better from the get-go. I'm going to be happy to do that. And now it's time to move good old Guderian. And I'm just going to point these guys right at Sedan. Looking ahead. Yeah, one thing too, because I took out so much of the French Air Force on the first couple turns, I really don't care that I'm double stacking divisions. If they had a good air cover and my fighters weren't set to intercept, this would be the time to try to attack, but the French Air Force isn't really going to do anything. And historically, the French Air Force had trouble doing things. Even when they saw units, the French command and control was so bad that it was hard to get attack orders without generals and different departments of the army counteracting each other. And so I'm not worried. I'm just going to keep moving forward. Oh, we're so close. These early turns are just anticipation. Then it's going to be the deliberation. Because we want those early attacks to go really, really well. All right, here. I think I'm going to spread the panzers out just a little bit. And by taking my two big Panzer Corps in separate directions, it's going to give me a couple different options. If I face too much opposition crossing the Meuse in one or another of the river areas, then I can focus on the different corps. I really only need one corps to blast open my big hole and then be able to pour through and rush to the coast. So this is going to give me two options. It's why I'm going to kind of spread out Panzer Group Kleist and just take it easy. I know the recon doesn't show a lot of units at Sedan, but if they start pulling units from their other areas and converging on it once I get a crossing, I'm going to want different areas I can go over the Meuse. But right there, this is most of my movement. I'm not too keen to attack those Belgian units without full movement points, so I'm just going to start launching airstrikes. Against a human player, this might not be the best idea because they would know exactly where I'm coming. When they go to their history, if they can see you've hit this many times in one spot, they're going to know you're there. But for the AI, even if they know I'm there, they can only do so much. And I do lose a bridge. I kill a lot of units. I'm hitting their cavalry divisions, but I don't like that I just blew up that bridge. I'm going to have to make sure I keep my engineers nice and close. And the French, anything I can do to get these fortress units weakened and make them less likely to put up a good defense, I'm going to be all for that. And yep, I think that's going to about do it. Really not a whole lot left. I just want to make sure I have no air units that I have not been neglecting. Make sure I move up some of my rear guard. And yep, I have a couple left. Let's just ruin their day, see if I can get anything. Level bombers will do some damage in the forest. However, I don't really have the movement points to capitalize that, unfortunately. I have some encirclements threatening here. So if I hit these units, reduce their movement points, they're going to be less likely to be able to retreat out. And good results. I am not going to complain about that one bit. I have a lot of political points, and I'll come back to it. I might actually terror bomb the Dutch. I'm going to see how this result goes, but it might be worth it. I don't know. I gotta ponder that for a minute. And that's the fun thing, is there's enough to do. You don't have to make those monumental decisions and don't have to do it in a snap manner. Move up 4th Army Reserve. Definitely get their artillery up. And just clean up crew here. So if we look, I think I'm going to go historical. I don't need an extra motorized division. I think my plan is sound enough. And right there, instantly, they're going to lose 10 national morale. 7th Flieger, though, I'm going to wait. What I usually like to do is if I can get an almost encirclement on the French, I'm going to drop the paratroopers and help complete it as I get further there. But overall, I hope you guys enjoyed. Next turn, we should really start getting into the thick of it as we try to cross. As always, if you guys learned something or enjoyed, like, comment, subscribe, and stay excited about history, and I will see you guys in the next video.